Hello, everybody. We are on the last section of the Micro 2 unit, part 3, other key terms when it comes to supply and demand. So I'm going to keep this simple, keep it brief, because you've been listening to me for long enough. So here we go. First off, we have to look at how do you graft supply and demand together? And that's an important thing to look at because we're going to be doing a lot with this, and some of your exercises coming up are going to focus on this idea. And so supply is going to go up and away, right? As prices increase, people want to produce more. And demand's going to go the opposite. As demand increases, people want to pay less, right? And so the goal is equilibrium. And that is a price where you see the amount people want to pay for a good and the amount a company is willing to supply a good is the same price and the same amount. And that's really important. That's what you want to hit. If I'm creating shoes, for example, I want to sell them at a price point where there's enough people that want to buy the shoe for that price, and there's enough people that want to make it for that price. So that's called equilibrium. That's the X. It's where it crosses, and the price and the quantity are the same for sellers and buyers. That's the sweet spot. But we don't always hit that sweet spot, and sometimes we have too much of a product. Sometimes we don't have enough, and that's when things get a little interesting. We'll get in that in a second. So here's what we have. We have a demand and a supply schedule here. So first off, the demand schedule, we're looking at apples. So these are the prices that we see for apples, right? Okay. Well, when we chart it, it looks something like this. It's not perfect because I'm not perfect at graphing with a computer mouse. But it looks like that. It's downward sloping. It's what you expect. As the price gets real low, people want to buy a lot more apples. I mean, if you look at this, when it's at $1, you have about 2,500 they want, but they want 5,000 when it's at 10 cents, which makes sense. And then we see the other side of this, the supply, and they're the opposite. They want to sell 5,000 at $5. The demand side doesn't want to buy any at that price. But they meet, and it's not perfect here. But if you look at your numbers, at $1, you see 2,500 is supplied, and at $1, 2,500 are demanded. And so this is your equilibrium, that point where they meet right there. But what happens in a situation where you don't meet? Well, you have a surplus or a shortage. A surplus happens when you have too much of a good. And it could be because you produced too much that year. It could be because people don't have enough money to pay for it. It could be a lot of different things realistically. So when do we see a surplus? Well, a lot of times we see surplus with crops. For example, if you have a really good corn crop, you may have more than you need. And surpluses traditionally lead to companies selling goods at a lower price because they're trying to get rid of them and they're trying to make some money off of them. I always talk about Kohl's with the surplus. You ever see a clearance rack at Kohl's? Bingo, all the time. That's because that's a surplus. Some of those clothes, they purchase too many of them and they're trying to get rid of them. So a surplus will usually lead to a lower price. Clearance is a great example of that. Now, shortage. A shortage is a situation where there simply is not enough. So if you look at this graph here for chocolate bars, the key spot you want to hit is this $1.20. However, there's not enough of them to hit that key spot. And so you're going to be in a situation where if there's only this many, well, then there's a lot of people that cannot buy what they want. And so if the quantity supplied is way down here and the quantity demanded is way over here, you're looking at 400 chocolate bars people can't buy. We see shortages a lot of times with popular items around Christmas, maybe. For you, maybe when you were little, you had a Tickle Me Elmo. I remember when the Tickle Me Elmo went out, it was crazy. Everybody was like fighting at Christmas time to get one because all the kids wanted it and there wasn't enough. So you literally saw like some fist fights break up over these Tickle Me Elmos, which is crazy. But the pandemic has made this teaching very, very simple for me because what have we seen in the pandemic that has run out of supply? Toilet paper, TP, classic example of it, where the quantity supply just simply isn't enough for what we need. We saw it with masks as well. Right now we're seeing it with vaccines. If you're watching this in 2021, there's not enough vaccines for the supply needed for the world. And so shortage, that's what you have. The number that is supplied cannot meet demand for whatever reason. It may be simply they don't have enough time to produce them. It could be that it's a food product and it needs another year to grow. It could be a lot of different things. So some of the other factors that we see that sometimes come into play, the first one's going to be price controls. A legal maximum price that may be charged for a particular good or service. And so you cannot charge above that price. So can you think of any examples of something where we would limit how much you can purchase it for? You can't go above the price. Well, I looked a few examples here. Sometimes we have rent controls. And so a person can only charge you so much for rent for renting an apartment. Sometimes we have insurance rates can only go so high. So that's a good thing for the consumers. It protects them a little bit. Also, you might see it with a product like gasoline or utilities where they can only charge so much because these are things that people need to live. So they could work. Next is rationing, and that's limiting supplies of items in high demand. Now, thankfully in our lives, we haven't really seen a whole lot of rationing. If you talk to your parents or maybe grandparents in the 80s, they may have had rationing with gas. But the best example of rationing comes from war. World War II, for example, you had to have ration stamps for everything. And so literally, if I wanted to go into the store and buy sugar, I would have to pay them for it, but I also have to give them this government stamp that said that I had the right to buy sugar. I couldn't buy as much as I wanted. It was limited. And they did that because there's a limited supply and they need it for the war effort. Same with tires or gasoline. I could only get a few gallons of gasoline a week because they're trying to save it for the war effort. So that's what we see when it comes to rationing. The third one is the black market, illegal market for goods that are traded above legal maximum or where legal goods are sold. So maybe somebody wants something, but they can't get it because there's a limited supply and you can only charge so much. Well, the black market, you may charge a little extra for it. So we see this a lot with drugs. Illegal drugs are sold on the black market because they're not allowed. We see it with guns and weapons that are not registered or cannot legally be purchased. Those would be a few examples we see for the black market. Last is a price floor, and this is a minimum required price. You cannot sell for under that price. So what have we seen with this? Well, we see it with agricultural products sometimes. The government might say that, you cannot sell corn or wheat or something for lower than this price. And the idea there is they're going to help the farmer. They're protecting the farmer in that situation. Or it could be something like minimum wage. That's a price floor. You have to pay at least that much. And that, again, is put in place to try to help the employees, you and I. So that's what we have for the last of this unit. If you have any questions, let me know. Hopefully that wasn't too long. You have a great day, and I'll see you soon. Bye.